Hey, I'm Neto, and we are here for another Behind the Actions episode. And we have another guest today. I invited one of our engineers from the developer relations team. Say hello, Taylor.
Hey, how's it going?
And what do you do in our team?
So I'm an engineer for Actions on Google. I help build client libraries, code samples, snippets, basically anything that'll help developers build actions for the Google system.
So when they go to the GitHub repo and find some cool samples there, you were one of the responsibles there. If one people want to open issues for you, no, I'm kidding. But yes, right? You post code there, create code labs, whatever.
Yeah, any code that is open source on the Actions on Google GitHub, I've contributed to. So if anyone has any issues or questions about that, they can reach out to us there.
Nice. And then today, the idea is to build the fulfillment code, but using the Java client library, right?
Right.
So, for example, if you remember the first episode with Jessica, we built the lucky number calculator I used some machine learning, very serious stuff to calculate that, and we're gonna use today. Of course, it's just measuring the length of the string, but at that time we used Node.js. It was our first client library, and now we have this Java Kotlin client library, right?
Right.
So, okay, so let's build it and see how it's gonna work with the Java client library. But first, what is a client library, Taylor? How we could explain to a person, I'm starting with the Actions on Google development. What is a client library?
Right. So a client library is a library or a tool that can help developers more easily code their apps. So for when you're building for the Google Assistant, a lot of the communication back and forth is done in JSON.
Okay.
And if you're using a language that's object-oriented like Java, handling JSON is not really it's not really easy to do.
You have a lot of boilerplate code to do, check the entities, the kind of objects, right?
Right. So providing a client library allows you to take any data and represent it as an object in Java, so it's more easy to work with.
But also, it's important because we are also giving some tools, right, to handle some specific, for example, the intent helpers or transactions. They don't need to check what's the correct name of that permission. We already are kind of wrapping everything on the client library, right?
Right. So it wraps a lot of functionality. So we have a lot of helpers when you're building actions for checking permissions, confirmations, stuff like that. And these are just converted into simple methods in Java that you can just call. There's also some annotations in Java that allow you to mark things as intent handlers so that you can specify specific pieces of code for each of your intents that you're creating.
Makes the developer life easier, right?
Right.
So yeah, and just remember, like we already said in the first episode and saying again, you can use any language you prefer. If you're coding Ruby, Python, Rusty, whatever, PHP, there's no problem. But we only have these two client libraries right now. Maybe when you are watching this video, we already have another one. So check out our GitHub. And by the way, the code is out there, right? If someone wants to check how we are coding, we are doing the client library, or even create a new client library for another language and want to use our code base, they can check it out, right?
Yeah, so all of our code samples are open sourced on GitHub, including the stuff that we're going to be using today.
Okay, so just wrapping up this part so we can start code, because I think people start shaking without see some code for a long time. For example, the client library want to work like I can add this as a dependency in our project. So using IntelliJ or any other IDE, Vim or something like that, they can add this as a library, right? So it's on Maven.
Right. So the client library is available on Maven Central. So you can use basically any Java IDE that you wish, Eclipse, IntelliJ. Today we'll be using IntelliJ. And the dependency will be pulled from Maven Central using a build script. We'll be using Gradle for that.
Okay.
And yeah, we can.
Nice. So let's start. First, in terms of the requirements, what does the developer need in the machine to run this library, the project, for example?
Right. So as I mentioned before, you'll first need an IDE.
Okay.
And then you'll need to check out the code off GitHub.
Okay.
Once you have the code, you can import it into your IDE.
Okay.
And then also for deployments, depending on where you're deploying your code.
Your cloud provider, something like that.
Your cloud provider. So today we're going to be using Google App Engine.
Cool.
And to deploy, you'll need a tool called the Cloud SDK.
Yes. So if you need more information about the Google App Engine, please go to our cloud.google.com. There's a ton of tools there, right, of manuals so you can check. we're gonna use the Google App Engine because it's the easier way, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
It's just few commands you can deploy and have it working. But if you have your own cloud provider, if you have your own server, there's no problem. Just remembering, the actions on Google requires HTTPS connection and external connection. So if you have only an internal server or network, won't be able, because the Google Assistant must reach your webhook, right?
Right.
So, and this is one of the reasons why we have the Google App Engine, I don't know, fits perfectly for this case, right?
Right.
So, okay, let's stop talking. Can you please show us, let's start with the project creation.
So if you visit the console or the Actions on Google console, you can actually create a project here.
Okay.
And then you give your project a
Let's
name.
put Java lucky number calculator, just to make different from the previous one, the other episode.
Java lucky.
Okay. And I think most of our viewers, they already kind of familiar with this process, so we won't make too much comments about this. If you have any questions about and if you doubts about how to create a project, please go to our first Behind the Actions episode, where we go through all the creation process, like explaining all details about all the fields. But right now, let's go straight through, right, to the intent creation. It's good. So now, before, I think the first step is customize the welcome intent, just to add a message, right? Say, hello, tell me your favorite color, right?
Right.
Just make it similar to the first episode we had. The idea, we should, for example, customize the welcome intent and change the phrase, the welcome, the response to something like, for example,
what is your favorite
color? I can remove this, right? And add a new response like, what's your favorite color? For now, let's use just one, but again, it's just because we already went through the process of creating an action. So now hit save. I think it's good, right? But to handle the user answer, we need another intent. So Taylor gonna create a new intent. My job is easier today, right? I'm just saying him to do something, but because the idea is to go straight forward to the back-end fulfillment development. So favorite color, great. Add something phrase like, my favorite color is orange, yes, purple, etc. Perfect. So now we need to enable the fulfillment, right? So let's go to fulfillment, enable fulfillment. Perfect, save. But if we go to the fulfillment section, for example, we don't have the webhook yet, right?
Right. So we need to set that up.
Okay, so let's use the Java library.
Right.
How is the process, for example, if I'm starting with development, how is the process? For example, I'm just here and I want to start right now creating this project.
Right. So my first recommendation would be to download an IDE. I have an IDE pre-installed, IntelliJ.
Okay.
Once you have your text editor, you can go to the Actions on Google GitHub.
Okay.
And view all of our open source projects. There you will find a boilerplate project for the Java client library. So
this is very cool, right? Because we already created some classes and code, so you can start your project without, for example, it's not from scratch. We already created some structure compatible with Google App Engine, and also we created an AWS handler. But in this case, we're gonna delete this handler because we only need the Google App Engine handler, right?
Right.
So you can download here or through a command line, whatever you prefer, right?
Right. So if you visit the GitHub, you can clone the project.
Okay.
Let's see.
Terminal.
Go to terminal. I'm gonna make a directory called Java
Very nice terminal.
Library demo.
Okay.
And then we can clone the project.
Perfect. So what's happening now? If you're not familiar with this, the GitHub, we are downloading the code from the GitHub. This code was created by Taylor and the rest of the team, so it helped you a lot. So what's the structure here, Taylor?
So once you check out the code, you can actually open it in your text editor.
Okay.
It's probably easier to view
the
structure of the code there.
How they can open this there.
Yeah, so if you open IntelliJ, you can import the project by clicking the Import Project button and navigating to
where you download your clone.
The clone directory.
Okay.
and selecting the build.gradle file.
Oh yes, in this case you are using Gradle, so it's easier to do all the build tasks, right?
Right.
But if you are using Maven, you also can use your own architecture, so no worry. But this case already it's ready. You can just open the IntelliJ and import.
Right.
And it's very cool because it's kind of already the dependencies, right? The wrapper is there, right?
Right. So Gradle will handle all the dependencies that the project uses.
Nice.
It'll compile your project, build all the class files,
Cool.
and then yeah. So if you don't have Gradle installed on your machine, you can actually use the Gradle wrapper that's combined or packaged with IntelliJ.
Nice. Yeah, this is a good point. For example, if you are new to the Gradle world or something like that and don't have this on your machine, you can also start from our code that we always wrap the compatible version with the code. So
Right.
it's ready?
Yeah. So as soon as you import the project, you'll see that
Nice.
everything builds.
Okay. And can you comment about the structure here, about what classes we have here and how they're organized?
Yeah, sure. So if you look at the source code and you go to the main folder, you'll see a couple classes.
Okay.
There's one of the classes is Action Servlet. This is a entry point into your backend. So
Nice.
when you deploy your project or your fulfillment code, any requests and responses will go through this class, the server class.
Nice. And this class, for example, the developers, they don't need to customize this class, right? Because already doing all the work for them, right?
Right. So the boilerplate, we provide two different entry points. We provide one that's just a basic servlet, which is really common in Java.
Okay.
And then we also provide one for AWS Lambda.
Okay.
Because the request and response that come in is a tad different, you have
Okay.
to handle them differently.
Okay. So you can remove, for example, the AWS render in this case, right? So
Yeah, so we can
delete.
Since we're not using AWS, we can completely delete this class.
Nice. But now I see another class here. So where should I, for example, because on the Node.js client library, I have to create a function, and then I have a function per intent, right?
Right.
And then one of the methodologies, but you have one method per intent. We have something similar for the Java client library.
Yeah. So if you look at the second class that we have here, we have this My Actions app class.
Okay.
This is equivalent to the app instance in the Node.js client library.
Nice. Okay.
So
It's where the magic happens, right?
yeah, this is where all the magic happens. So this is where you define any code for handling any of your intents. And depending on if you're using Dialogflow or Actions SDK, you can instead of using the constructor like you would in Node.js of instantiating an instance of Dialogflow app or Actions SDK app, you extend the classes Dialogflow app or Actions SDK app.
Cool. So we have a bunch of boilerplate also, like welcome, but we are not using the fulfillment to reply the welcome intent, right? We are handling all from Dialogflow. In this case, we can, for example, remove this, right? I'm right?
Yeah. So we created a project on our own in Dialogflow. So we can remove any intent handlers here. We can actually reuse this default welcome intent one.
Yeah,
because it's just
better.
a basic
exactly.
welcome intent.
Remember to check the intent name, right? So have the same name on the notation.
Right. So the annotation should match the intent name that was defined in Dialogflow. So if we go back to our project in Dialogflow, we'll see that our default welcome intent is named default welcome intent. And looking back at our code, we have the default welcome intent annotation for this block of code. Yeah,
but in this case, we won't use this one. We just reuse the code, right? And the name must match the favorite color, right?
Right. So because our default welcome intent doesn't reach out to fulfillment, we do not need this one.
Great.
We can go ahead and go to our favorite color intent and change it to handle this intent instead.
Okay, let's go.
So to do that, we can change the annotation to be favorite color.
Okay. And how do I know the color that user said, right? Because on Node.js, for example, I have the parameter after the conversation object. And here we are sending also parameter, right? Can you go back? Yeah, so you go the action parameters, we have the color.
Right.
How we handle this parameter in the Java client library?
So this parameter is passed into your Java backend. And to actually access these parameters, you would use a get parameter method on the request.
So I don't need, for example, if I have a bunch of parameters. I don't need to keep changing the method signature. For example, it allows me maybe if I'm sending new parameters, it won't break my code, for example, right? So
Right.
it's like, okay, I'm adding these parameters and I'm going to use maybe in another moment and it won't break the code, right? So I can keep using the same.
Yeah.
Cool. So show us all the AI stuff that you do on the color string and return the lucky number.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So just looking at the method body of this, let me actually delete this.
Okay.
So first, when you create an intent handle, you'll need a response builder to build your response.
Okay.
So we declare that. Next, we'll want to grab the color that the user said.
Okay.
And to do that, you can actually do request.getParameter and then specify the name of the parameter that you want.
Okay.
So here we named it color.
Perfect.
So back in our code, we can say we want the color parameter.
Okay.
And all parameters come back in Java as objects, so you'll have to cast them to like a string. In this case, it'll be a string.
Okay.
So we can say color is equal to string.
Nice. And now the machine learning.
And now the machine learning code.
Yeah.
So
is this calculated on the blockchain? I'm kidding. So I like these buzzwords. Maybe we can more viewers with these buzzwords.
Right. So we're going to use machine learning to generate a number.
Okay.
So to do that, we'll get the color. And we'll get the length of the color. And then we'll actually multiply it by just a special number.
1, 2, 3. This is a very special number.
Very, very special.
Yeah.
And then once we have that number, we can actually return it to the user.
Okay. And I'll add what the assistant gonna say, right? So the lucky number. Oh, nice.
Right. So for our response, we'll want to have some kind of prompt to the user. So in this case, we can say your lucky number is, and then the number that we got back.
Nice. Okay.
And then to add that to the response, we'll use our response builder.
Okay.
And then use the add method to add that string as a response. And then if we want to end the conversation in Java, the equivalent in Node is, so you have .close.
.close, yes.
In Java, to end the conversation, you can call .end conversation.
Okay.
On the end of your response builder.
Yeah, and this is a very interesting point that when we were planning the API, designing the API, I remember some discussions about the method names, and we had some people saying, hey, maybe the method name should match the Node.js. Right. And actually, we kind of think different because we are writing a very Java idiomatic library. So if you already use it to standard Java and Kotlin, and by the way, this library is developed in Kotlin, right? So the code is in Kotlin. So if you are used to the Java idiomatic, the syntax, you'll be very familiar with the APIs we created, right? So, but probably you see some difference if you are migrating from the Node.js to the Java. Maybe like you said, instead of conv.close would be like end conversation. So, but yeah, good to frame it. I think it's important.
Yeah. So once you're ready to deploy, you can actually open the terminal in IntelliJ.
Okay.
To do that, you can go to View, Tool Windows, Terminal.
Nice. And this is cool because you're already being your project class path and everything else, so you don't need to like check if you're on the right path, right?
Right. So it automatically detects where the project path is. You don't have to have a separate terminal window open and have to like cd into a directory. This is cool. So when you're ready to deploy, you'll need to use the Cloud SDK tool that I mentioned earlier before.
Okay.
We have it pre-installed on this machine right now. And to use it, you can say gcloud init to initialize your project.
Great.
From there, it will ask you to initialize a project, and you can say create new configuration.
Okay.
And give it some kind of name. Number.
Okay.
And then log in with your email. So after you configure your project, you will want to actually deploy the application. You can do that from the terminal, or IntelliJ also provides
shortcut, like
it provides a shortcut in the Gradle tab.
Oh, nice.
So in the boilerplate that we provide, we have a bunch of Gradle tasks for...
And let me guess, one is to the Google App Engine task.
Yeah, so we have one for deploying to Google App Engine. So if you go to the Gradle tab in IntelliJ...
This is why we hire you, guy. Yeah,
you can go to Tasks, App Engine, and then...
Deploy.
There's App Engine Deploy. So if you double-click that...
Oh, it's the moment, you know?
Yep, the dancing moment.
Let's see if it's working.
The deploy dance.
Let's see.
Right.
You only have the right to do the deploy dance if you deploy it. So, but let's see. It's working. It's now, what's happening is creating the instance, right? Because the Google App Engine is like a platform as a service, right? So it's uploading all the code, create a new instance. In general, the first time you run is kind of slowly than the other times, right?
Yeah, so initially it'll be a little slow. It'll take around a few seconds. And then once it's deployed, any follow-up deployments will be a lot quicker.
Okay, finish. It's deployed. We can check. Can you check the endpoint? This is the endpoint?
Yeah, so this is the endpoint. So our endpoint right now is only responding to post request. Actually, I think in the... Let's see.
With this URL, you can now fill the webhook.
Yeah, so using this URL, we can actually set up our fulfillments by providing the dialog flow.
Great. So, nice. So we can save here. But there's one, just before we do the deploy the action there and do the test with our incredible Google Home Hub, we must configure at least the name of the action, right? Because I think we are using My Test App, right? Something's very common. People, when they are doing the first project, they are doing like with My Test App. You can go on the Actions Google Console, right? And just remember on the for invocation, let's change to Java lucky number just to make sure that we are invoking the right action. So people say we are not cheating here. No, we're not using a pre we made the homework and have some working code before. But it's okay. Now it's time to integrate, deploy to the Google Hub, to test, right? Wow, it's deployed. As you can see in your screen, we are seeing the simulator, but we won't test on the simulator. Let's test on the Home Hub, and I will judge if you are allowed to do our deploy dance when it works. So, hey Google, talk to Java lucky number.
Okay, let's get the test version of Java lucky number.
Hey, what's your favorite color?
Orange.
Your lucky number is 738.
Ooh, it's working! Nice. Yeah, I like this. Yeah, good. So, what happened here? So we just test from your App Engine. You deploy it. We copy the URL, set up the fulfillment
dialog,
and it can work. It's working, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, maybe it's kind of very simple, but this is the idea to showcase how the pieces you have to connect. But for example, just remember, all the features are available, right? Everything we have on the platform is already available. So rich responses, what else?
Yeah, rich responses. So you have things like your basic cards, your carousels, anything that is available in the Node client library will be available in the Java client library.
And if they want to check something right now and see how to use these advanced features, where they should go?
So if you want to check out any advanced features of our platform, you can always check out our developer documentation.
Cool. And also some samples.
And also, yeah, we have code samples that outline things like updates, push notifications, transactions, conversation components.
Nice. And this is great. So again, we demonstrated here how to use the Google App Engine and the Java client library using the IntelliJ, but if you're using Kotlin in Eclipse and deploying to another cloud provider to your own infrastructure, it's totally up to you. We are only providing the client library and the boilerplate code to save you some time. Well, I think we kind of covered the basic stuff around the client library, right?
Right.
So any other thing we would like to mention, remember developers about it?
Yeah, sure. So our client library is written in Kotlin. This allows you it provides interoperability when you're coding. So you can either call Java code or Kotlin code while you're developing your actions.
Yeah, and they can find us on Twitter, right? We have our team handles actions on Google. Also, our Twitter handle, if you want to talk with us. All the information will be on the video description, so you can find our Twitter. And also remember, if you are posting something cool or did something cool, or have any comment about this, please use the AOG Devs hashtag on Twitter. We can see that. And also, we are on a new platform now. We have a section on Reddit, and also Stack Overflow. Our team's always checking Stack Overflow and Reddit to answer our questions, right? So, okay, thank you, Taylor, for being here. It was great. And remember, if you have want to see any other advanced thing or different thing, check our GitHub, github.com/actions on Google. There are plenty of samples using the Java client library and everything. Okay? Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Thank you, guys.